Right, thank you very much. My name is Stewart Beattie. I'm from the faculty, from the Department of Civil Engineering, but I have to use these slides. I run an apprenticeship programme in the Department of Civil Engineering, and I've been talking about this for the last 36 hours to the other fellows, for apology for this. There is some things I haven't said, so there is some new things for you. I have, well, 3 pots of funding. There was an initial very small amount of seed funding from QAA to look at the diversity on the apprenticeship, and it's pretty poor, which is kind of why we applied for funding. But I also have Ignite funding, and I'm an EDI Plus Fellow as well, so I have the revolutionary idea of not only being paid for my time, but being able to pay someone else's time as well, which is entirely new in the academic world. So I do have a research associate who is just waiting to be employed as soon as he gets his new passport. But he's from the more humanities side, he's studying politics, and he's going to help look at some of the more demographic information. So the current situation is that apprenticeships were initially set up to improve social mobility and improve skills. Now, we can argue about whether they're improving skills or not, but they're certainly not increasing social mobility, and the cohorts sector-wide seem to be less diverse than the equivalent traditional full-time programmes. Kind of coupled with that, retention is also an issue sector-wide on these programmes, and people that are getting onto the programmes are struggling to have any success. And part of that could be because we're recruiting from a very small pool of people, the same people over and over again. Part of that problem might be that employers have significant new powers, and I've had to quote that because that's a direct quote, is that employers not only have new powers into how to put people into higher education, but they also want to know how to recruit people at that level, because a lot of employers didn't do that before. They just took graduates. This is Strathclyde data about our civil engineering programme, so please don't take any pictures of this slide. But basically, we started the civil engineering apprenticeship in 2019-20, and it was 20 blokes in a room, which was pretty bad. Now, there has been some improvement on that front as we get up to over 100 students on the programme, but it's still really bad, and it still lags behind our already pretty bad situation with our undergraduate full-time traditional students who are studying full-time. I've used only gender imbalance there, partly because the next slide has some good context about how it looks across Scotland and across different subjects, but also if I did include any intersectionality in there, you'd be able to identify the individuals from the numbers. And we actually didn't recruit a non-white female until our 4th round of recruitment, which is pretty bad. So this is the kind of out-of-date data, but it's what's been published by Skills Development Scotland, who are the kind of arm's-length government body that have been running apprenticeships. It shows gender balance or imbalance across all the programmes that are apprenticeships in Scotland, much fewer than in England. Much fewer programmes available. I've highlighted in red the non-STEM subjects, which generally the gender balance picture is completely different to the STEM subjects. So I think in terms of apprenticeships in Scotland, the useful focus for this study is STEM subjects, not always the case, of course, for the energy sector. And I'm also showing you this to say that at that point, there was just shy of 5,000 data points enrolling on the programmes. We've now had 3 more recruitment cycles since then, or we're into the 3rd since then, so there'll be lots more students to look at if we can get access to the data, which is not yet published. And intersectionality might be really interesting to look at for that several thousand population size. There's a lot of general knowledge about recruitment, and we found that this has been published lots of different ways, lots of different times. Generally speaking, people know that you can anonymise applications, but it's not yet happening in apprenticeships. You can be careful about the language that you use, and unconscious bias is a problem. So you can consider some of these things and improve your practices, but it's not happening in apprenticeships, and we've known this stuff for a long time. Why it's not happening in apprenticeships, I'm not sure. But it could be to do with the sort of range of people that are recruiting. There are existing resources. I don't expect you to be able to read that, but these are sort of interactive online things that you can click on rather than just a blank web page. And this is direct graduate apprenticeship advice for people running programs in Scotland, people employing in Scotland. And it has a lot of the things that I've just shown you on the slide, but I would say the language is not quite direct enough. It's try this, and have you considered that? Including, have you considered actually advertising your posts, which is a problem. And there's also a checklist for inclusive job descriptions. So there is some advice out there, but it's not doing what we wanted to do. So the very initial phase of what we have done beyond just looking at the literature is that we interviewed some of our employers, semi-structured interviews that I wasn't involved with because I already had a relationship with them. And we asked them about the doers list on the left there, and that was the kind of general topic areas. What was quite important was that even though it was only 9 employers, it was a good representation of large multinational companies and quite small setups that have maybe only got a few employees, a handful of employees. So there was a range of people from HR professionals who were generally very well versed in this kind of thing, and engineers who perhaps aren't quite as well versed in the problems of recruitment and how you can be quite exclusive in recruitment. And they were really engineers tasked with making their companies bigger and growing their companies. So they had a lot of different things to do, including recruit. So that leads to a few problems. And what we found was that well, first of all, the reasons for recruiting apprentices, and this is why I've got notes because I keep forgetting what people said. They're really looking for to create a pipeline and to create sort of successful people to stay with the companies. You know, they can nurture them through the careers. It's an alternative route towards a career in engineering, and it is also giving them a chance to get back some of the money that they've paid through taxes. So the apprenticeships are funded by taxing companies, and then the only way to get that money back is to employ apprentices. So there is an opportunity because people are targeting new recruits. It's not, typically it's not people being promoted from within, it's usually new recruits, and it's usually quite young people who are straight out of school or straight out of their HNC, that kind of thing in college. So there is an opportunity to improve things. And we're not at all stuck with the population that we currently have. One big problem that is still happening, and I think it's partly to do with time pressures, is that informal word of mouth is still being used as a way of recruiting. So posts are not being advertised. There is a website called apprenticeships.scot that people can put their adverts on. I think it's free, and they don't do it. I don't know why they don't do it. So that's maybe part of the next stage that I need to find out why. But informal word of mouth is obviously really bad because then you're talking to the same people that you always talk to, and from that you'll get the same people and the same recruits into your companies. So that's something that needs addressed. The decision making is not always made by multiple people, and it's not always justified in some kind of scoring system. It's quite informal. It's kind of based on gut feeling. It's based on, I'm an excellent judge of character. It's based on some really outdated and pretty bad practices. So that's something that, again, needs addressed. There is not the objective scoring systems that we know can help in these kind of situations. So it's not getting through. The last point, we did ask them about organisational culture, and they spoke about how important that was, and that sort of morphed into cultural fit. So they were talking about recruiting people that fitted into the culture already, which is pretty problematic for very obvious reasons. So that's just what we found from talking to 9 employers. There are lots of different ways that we can go. We're currently only looking at our programme. As I showed you before, there's lots of other programmes and thousands of apprentices. We need to talk to the apprentices and find out what their experiences of getting onto the programme. I'd like to talk to people who didn't get onto the programme, but that's obviously very difficult. How do you find them? An idea that came from the research associate was to do a language analysis of adverts, which is quite interesting given what we've seen, just to check across the board, are we getting the kind of language that we know is kind of exclusive and pretty male-dominated language? And the last 2 points have come really in the last day or two with the fellowship meetings that we've been having and talking about the projects. And that is to talk about a pilot intervention, first of all. So I've already presented some of this to employers to stunned silence over Teams. And I imagine absolutely no changes to their practices. So a one-to-one approach, because I already have a bit of a working relationship with these employers, to say, well, you're struggling to recruit and you keep sending me people with a D in maths. Maybe we could think about, you know, broadening the pool a little bit, and here's how you could do it. Because I'm still getting the same profile through this year in this round of recruitment as I always have. So a one-to-one kind of pilot intervention might make them more inclined to get on board and make some of these changes that we want. And also take the feedback from them, give them a bit of ownership. I think will be very important to get their buy-in. And the last point is work that's ongoing anyway, is to collaborate with other apprenticeship providers, because there's a growing body of work around apprenticeships because they've been running for a number of years, and the EDI aspects of it, everyone I speak to is very interested in collaborating on it. So yes, that's the last thing I want to say. Thank you very much.